and welcome to Get the Table, another wrestling roundtable discussion podcast with myself, Adam Wilborn, birthday boy Michael Hamflett, and Michael Sidgwick here to discuss another burning wrestling issue. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, for daily wrestling podcasts, where we talk about everything, really. Raw, SmackDown, the Wednesday Night War between AEW and NXT pay-per-views. We have interviews, roundtable discussions, just like this one, and a round of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on wrestle culture. But as I said, joined by birthday boy Michael Hamflett, 50 years old today, and Michael Sidgwick. And gents,
you're laughing at my name for, you dick.
He's popped himself talking about my age, which, by the way, I wasn't even going to bring up. It was my birthday, so thanks very much for dropping that one in the conversation.
Anyway, gents, we are gathered here today to talk about the best wrestlers of the empty arena. And today we're going to do something we've never really done before. We're going to try collectively, me, you two, and the listeners and the viewers are here on YouTube right now. Make sure you leave your comments and questions in the comment section below, and we'll try and get around to them in due course. I'm going to try and rank the top 10 best wrestlers of the empty arena era ranks. That's what we're going to try and do. We don't really normally do lists, but we're going to give it a go here at What Culture. Before we try and get some, categories and numbers into this, Michael Hamflett, when I talk and ask you about best wrestlers of the empty arena, what immediately pops into your head?
I'm going to go a bit unconventional for this podcast because I'm going to praise Seth Rollins. He was the easiest guy to mock in 2019, and it didn't look like things were going to get too much better despite that heel turn. But something about the empty arena seems to really suit this messianic complex thing that he's got. I thought his work in the Kevin Owens program was absolutely fantastic. His work in the match might have been even better than the promos, actually. The way that he just talks to Owens the entire time. He looked incredible in that white gear as well. Thought that's where that jumped out with that deathly dull empty performance center, even if there was no noise. And his promos that he clearly believes in, or at least believes in the material, and he is willing to deliver it with conviction, feel quite true in this era where you can't really cling on to anything. He feels like a natural opponent to Drew McIntyre. He's only really been involved with the Kevin Owens thing and then in that jobber squash, so he's been able to be more physical than you would imagine Seth Rollins to be. And I think there's just an element of surprise as well. It was hard to pass when this first started who was going to be able to sort of rear their heads above the rest, and Seth Rollins just wouldn't have been ones that you wouldn't have been one of the ones you would have expected. And it's just quite nice to see him having a better time of things than he did last year.
Sidge, what do you reckon to Rollins' inclusion on this list?
I would put him in there. I certainly would. There's something about his promo game. I don't know whether it's a true reflection of his quality or whether he'd been directed in arena times to purposefully do that WWE heel thing where he has to deliberately drone on and on and on because he's a heel and he has to be witless and he has to antagonize the crowd, not with sort of entertaining lines, but by boring them into submission, Corbin style, like that sermon. I'm convinced that was produced to just get people to get annoyed, not like love to hate, but just deeply, deeply irritated. So it feels like his stuff's more focused now. It feels like he's got a way of, as Hamflett points out, physically of really getting himself over as a stiff worker, because I think he was getting a bit too gently with these suicide dives that were high fives. So yes, Seth Rollins is on that list for me.
Lee Cleesby in the comments, thank you so much for your donation. It says, happy birthday, Hamflett. With the news that Jericho has recorded his commentary for the next few weeks, could we see him commentate on himself? Now, I assume that's because AEW had planned to record a lot more shows and now are, of course, going live from next week. But that doesn't mean they've got a lot of Jericho commentary recorded. Sidge, should we get some sort of Jericho soundboard, perhaps?
I mean, you'd need 5 of every letter for how many catchphrases he comes out with and how many just glorious bits of banter. It would look like Ali's Hacker Station, the Jericho soundboard. That's how goddamn great he is. To be honest, I don't know the logistics. It was reported that they'd taped enough content up to mid-May, but you can't imagine now that they've gone to the semi-finals of the tournament that was always going to lead to the finals, that being we're always going to lead to Double or Nothing. You can't imagine there's much more Jericho stuff, but then again, that conflicts with reports. They might have just binned off loads of the more exhibition leaning matches. I've got no idea, but I think that would be a tremendously cute idea, especially considering AEW are far more willing to just open themselves up to the madness and the banter of whatever this is. They're not like playing it really eerily and at times incongruously straight like WWE and NXT. So, yeah, I would love to see that.
And that sort of allows me to transition into asking you, Michael Sidgwick, about whether or not Chris Jericho makes this list. I mean, I don't need to ask that. Whereabouts on this list would he make it? Because he's been sensational, hasn't he? Not just, mainly on commentary.
Yes, he's been absolutely sensational on commentary. I was going to, before I corrected myself in my head just then, call him a revelation. It's not a revelation to me that he's so brilliant. He's an actual polymath of every single discipline and area of professional wrestling. I think if he was a referee, he would be outstanding at it. He's just been so great. He's opened himself up to the inherent farce of this without any kind of care as to how he's perceived. He's been quoting The Simpsons. He has been cutting promos on inanimate objects. Well, actually, Vanguard flies, and he has horrendous political views, so he's not really an inanimate object. He's just grasped that as hard as escapism is, it's much easier with like the slightest meta acknowledgement of what this all is and how he has to operate on a different wavelength to truly get to the fans to escape. And he's done that absolutely perfectly. He's not my number one, but he's most certainly on that list.
Quite a few names, Michael Hamflet, in the comment section. Let me find this. Bastian Clow, for example, a few others are talking about, Franco Dawson included, are talking about Dexter Loomis. Now, we've debated him on our Wednesday Night War Review podcast, which is well worth checking out. Just search for What Culture Wrestling, wherever you get your podcast from for that. But yeah, Hamflet, he's a divisive figure, I think it's fair to say.
I suppose he's divisive in the sense that none of us three doing this podcast like him, but the comment section clearly do. And I guess if there's a democratic element to this list that we're combining here in this podcast, then maybe he merits at least this conversation, if not inclusion in the 10. I suppose it depends on your taste in characters. You can't do a murderer in pro wrestling because he can't do what his single stated aim is as a character. So it's flawed from the off. His performance of it, I suppose, is entirely subjective. Might not be getting a great deal out of the things he's doing and his eyes at the moment in NXT, but obviously enough people are. These comments here are not the first praise that we've heard for Dexter Loomis when perhaps on our podcast we've been a bit more critical of his work. I don't like about Dexter Loomis the fact that he's kind of like the dark timeline Austin Theory of NXT. He's just been inserted into this role seemingly out of nowhere. It doesn't feel like he's ever wrestled or done anything of note in front of crowds, and then all of a sudden he's this key featured player. And even if you like that gimmick, and even if you're behind it and about it ultimately getting a push, the point of those characters on NXT generally has been that they take the right amount of time before getting there. Look how long it's taken for Velveteen Dream to find himself in a position where he can believably take on Adam Cole, for example. Dexter Loomis is a character that is months, if not years, away from being in that sort of position. And it seems like out of desperation, out of the fact that he's there and he's available, and they found one good thing that they seem to enjoy, that they're going to strap the rocket to him. And it just feels incredibly forced to me personally.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point because there are people in the comments section who've forged a connection with the character, and I don't want to piss on their chips, to use a British idiom, but I don't get it. I think that slither out of the ring thing he does, it's just not good. I don't think he fits with the state-of-the-art athleticism and high work rate that NXT excels at. And more to the point, if you just contrast what he does presence-wise with an Aleister Black, it just feels like an overt performance. Like he's playing a character and he doesn't exude that sort of stoic, silent, powerful menace that Aleister Black, for example, does. And one more thing, Brian Alvarez put this perfectly. If you're playing a quasi-serial killer character, first of all, you don't act weird, you act normal because you want to evade suspicion. And second of all, you don't name yourself after a fictional serial killer on a TV show that happened to be in vogue a few years ago. Silly for me.
Bradshaw08 has said, none of you three like Loomis. I think he's brilliant so far, although I'm worried he's going to be Heidenreich. Yeah, that's the concern you should have.
Can I just say as well that this mustache is in fact a tribute to Cody, not Dexter Loomis?
Sidge, let's talk about Asuka.
Oh, God damn it. When are you going to ask me about Kenny Omega? Will you do that next?
I'll do after that.
Right, thanks. You can obviously do Asuka, me, then Hamflet, then I need to talk about Kenny Omega. God damn it. God damn it. And I need to tell people about the intricacies of how great he is at this. But Asuka is like the A to my Kenny Omega's one, to be perfectly honest. The thing about Asuka, right, is that I get annoyed almost that she's being pushed at this moment in time because she's deserved the crowds all along. And yet they've realised, oh, hang on, we need someone who's actually really talented, not someone we think's talented, to come out and make this all a big distraction for everyone. Or who forgot that's really, really talented that we, for whatever reason, don't use? Oh, it's Asuka. It's a sensory overload with Asuka. She's such a visual icon of a performer with the makeup and the multicolored hair. You just can't take your eyes off her. Her look is absolutely incredible. So that's one sense. The sound, the guttural promos is just so terrifying, and it's almost like mischievous when she's in that high sort of mode of she's going to destroy you and she's going to have a huge sickly grin on her face when she does it. Her little dance that she does, which for the benefit of the YouTube comment section, that it's absolutely tremendous. It feels like she is most delighted when she's about to kick someone's head in. And in fact, she's commentated on matches when she is delighted watching other people kick other people's heads in. She lives for violence. She lives to entertain. She lives to be in an empty arena setting, which is an unfortunate tragedy of her career because, God damn it, I wish people were popping for this because she's amazing.
And the thing is, yes, it is, we're talking about it, of course, it's empty arena stuff, aside from a few people, but genuinely, when Asuka's there, she makes it seem like there's quite a few people in the arena when she's reacting. She's always doing audience reactions to herself when she's cutting promos and stuff like that. I think she agrees. She's absolutely captivating. We'll discuss her a little bit more when we get to this list. But Michael Hamflet, let's talk about Kenny Omega. I'm joking. Michael Hamflet, we got a comment here and a donation. Thank you so much to Matt Rains, who says, "Happy birthday, Hamflet. Love you, brother." Surely Lance Archer tops this list.
Yes, thank you, Matt Rains, on my birthday for not giving me a hospital pass here. Lance Archer is a guy that could have been the most unfortunate case study in this empty arena era. He made his debut, I think, in one of the last, Cedric could be able to pick this up, one of the last crowd-filled Dynamites, and it wasn't brilliantly received. He just appeared in the crowd. It felt a little bit ordinary for a guy that we knew was coming from New Japan with this incredible pedigree. And then he's walked into buildings with no people and made it seem as if he's just chased them out before he got there, because his squash matches have been fantastic. They've played upon this, I want to say, I don't know, reinvention feels harsh, but his reintroduction to the singles ranks in New Japan last year from working in a tag team for so many years before that seemed to light a fire under him as a worker as much as a character, and he's brought those two things together magnificently in AEW. It's just not mattered, and that's often what we search for in this empty arena setting. It's not mattered the circumstances with which he's found himself worked in. He clearly loves his work, battering Marco Stunt. He loves the opportunity to be cruel, as we saw with Dustin Rhodes last night. With Jake Roberts being able to cut promos now from a safe distance, you are allowed, if you choose, to enjoy that completely guilt-free compared to those really dicey early weeks where he was used amongst the other wrestlers. I even like the fact that even if it's in DDP's toilet or his back kitchen and they're just like using a black screen to mask it out, it looks absolutely fantastic. It looks like a place Jake Roberts would hang out, just in the darkness, just lurking behind the scenes. So I think even that aspect of his act works. This couldn't have gone any better. And as we alluded to on the Wednesday Night Wars, I think it's just that wonderful mix of booking, matching quality of the work.
Right, it's all yours, Sidge. Let's talk about Kenny Omega, because let's be honest, he looked terrible. He let that jobber get some offense in. What's he doing?
Oh my God, can we just not signal boost that idiotic take? Like, please, God damn it. I think if you're going to have to be qualified to talk about wrestling, you have to have seen some of it beyond WWE post 1998. Can we agree on that, for Christ's sake?
I'm buggered.
It just pisses me off like to high heaven.
It was a crap row. It wasn't just a crap take. It was a crap, the whole, like everything that happened to wrestling Twitter surrounding that, everything that orbited it was minging as a result of it.
I mourn for fans to appear in buildings more when I read Twitter than I do watching these shows, because it just shows what the discourse has been reduced to. But no, Kenny Omega, right? I want to use this match with Trent, even though every single one he's worked, in my opinion, in different ways has been great. So my thing about empty arena wrestling, and we see it across both shows, every time you see a certain high spot, every time you see even a Dustin Rhodes, right, a complete master of the craft at what he does, there are times when he'll bang his leg on the canvas, mainly like out of like muscle memory when he's on the cell, and it doesn't quite work because you've got like Billy Gunn and his son, like the hands against the barricade trying to cheer him on. And like, I get it, it's better than nothing, but there's still, in every single pro wrestling performer, they are wired to do things mostly for the benefit of the crowd. And then when they do that, and then you get the dissonance in your head when you realize there isn't a crowd there, it's jarring, you're taken out of the moment, you can't escape, it's just not the same, and it makes you feel a little bit glum inside. I've never got that once with Kenny Omega, which is crazy considering how spectacular a lot of his arsenal is. Just to use the match with Trent for a quick example, right? It was so clear to infer, and that's what I love about Kenny Omega's work. A lot of it you can infer and you can analyze. You're not getting told it, he shows it to you. His match with Trent was clearly against a fellow babyface, mostly, who just wanted to wrestle a match in the competitive spirit to just give the fans what they wanted, which is an escape, ostensibly. So the match started fair. A lot of the work suggested that there were two quite close pals or, respected colleagues who were just going to have a good, clean match. And then at one point, it became achingly clear, because he's Kenny Omega, he decided, Trent that is, I'm going to have to do something dirty to him to try and get this win. So he went after his recently broken hand, and then that caused a pivot in the match. Kenny Omega went ballistic, and then all of the high spots made sense because Trent had transgressed on this sort of sportsman-like treaty they'd made. He powerbombed him against a column. He suplexed him off the face of the earth. It got incredibly violent, but in a way that warranted the story that they told. That match did not need fans. And in fact, Kenny Omega structured that match in such a way that it could only have made sense in that environment. I appreciate the levels this guy does to reward my intelligence. I love Kenny Omega. I think he's the greatest pro wrestler of all time. And when he's not doing that, he is having the silliest matches with Michael Nakazawa and Chuck Taylor and Trent, because he realizes if it's not Fight Club, all of this, it's Treehouse of Horror. It's essentially non-canon stuff in the mid-card that is sort of being enforced by the Skeleton Crew. And he had a really silly match with Nakazawa that I just thought was absolutely hilarious, and it gave me a slight reprieve from these awful circumstances. Kenny Omega is number one on my list.
Yeah, I think you can't have any or many lists about best wrestlers, regardless of time period. Well, not regardless of time period. It doesn't really work for the Attitude Era. Or what about the Attitude Era? But without having Kenny Omega's name on it. Hamflet, I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball here. We're talking about best wrestlers of the empty arena. We are going to get to Sammy Guevara in a second because he is such a talent. But we can't talk about things like this without talking about two of the biggest stars of WrestleMania, being Bray Wyatt and The Undertaker. What do they enter into this conversation, or is that a completely, different realm of wrestling almost?
I think Bray Wyatt does and The Undertaker doesn't. And I can completely understand why both of those two are in the conversation because of the events of WrestleMania. But I'd ask, in regards to The Undertaker, for you to remember that skit in which he ran down in that contract signing and then the lights went off and then came back on. And you could hear the poor knackered old sod sliding out the ring to get behind Gallows and Anderson for that setup of the lights coming back on. That categorically did not work. That was one of the points when we always talk about escapism, when we talk about the point of all this, and it had never felt more pointless up to that point. And seeing The Undertaker have to do that. The Boneyard match, of course, whilst not my favorite thing about WrestleMania weekend, was, I would have to say objectively a success because people seem to absolutely love it and like all the YouTube clicks for it and all that sort of stuff. So lots of that was great. And I think that format preserves The Undertaker's legacy if they choose to do that again. Bray Wyatt, though, for me, does, because I thought his promos with John Cena were excellent in the build-up. I'm a bit of a sucker for some of WWE's stupid visuals sometimes, and I genuinely liked how Cena was distracted by The Fiend on the platform, and then Bray Wyatt came up behind him on that go-home edition of SmackDown. And then, obviously, at the time, we waxed lyrical about the success of the Firefly Funhouse match. Necessity has been the mother of invention with WWE and this character, The Fiend, and that match with John Cena, that would have been at best good. If it was a straight wrestling match between those two characters, The Fiend might have gone over. It might have been his best match to date in that gimmick, but it was something truly incredibly special. It was a WrestleMania moment, TM, that they always go looking for. It's one of the best things probably in the history of the show, in my opinion. So yeah, I think they might have found a setting here that suits that character. I want to caveat that by saying that could all be undone if they just go normal with the Braun Strowman match at Money in the Bank. I'm not suggesting we just do the same thing over and over again, but they have to be creative. Again, if they just try and do The Fiend versus Braun Strowman over 10 minutes at Money in the Bank, then you can strike all this off.
I should say, let us know your thoughts on some of the best wrestlers of the Empty Arena ranked in the comment section below. And I know we discussed this beforehand, lads, but I'm going to change how we do this. I realise this is 10 minutes before the end of the podcast, but I've thought about this. And rather than doing a sort of combined 10 from the two of you, what I've thought is, Hamlet, why don't you take top 5 WWE, Sid, you take top 5 AEW, and then we can really ramp up the arguments in the comment section. Michael Sidgwick, we haven't mentioned Sammy Guevara, and he is a man who deserves a mention.
Oh, God damn it. Sammy Guevara, absolutely incredible. His rendition of Judas by Fozzy on that first Dynamite, where it felt like the last days of Rome before they had to not have the fans at ringside, and then they had to like sort of elope, for lack of a better word, up to Georgia. It just felt like that was the show that they shouldn't do, but the show that I personally needed just to gradually let go. When he did that, it was the most stunningly, purposefully awful rendition of Dynamite that it kind of perfectly encapsulated his character and what makes him so great as a performer. He wasn't afraid to look like a complete dickhead. It was all his own stuff, and it came to him in that moment. I have to believe that he realized out the corner of his eye he was corpsing Chris Jericho, one of the most consummate professionals in the entire game, and he just decided to take it further to the point of total farce. Even MJF, who's like has to sort of protect his character and to make himself appear like his whole thing is I'm better than you. But at that moment, he was pissing himself with Sammy Guevara. He was willing to cede control and go, you know what, you're the funniest guy in the room tonight. I'm going to piss myself laughing. That's how good you are. It just felt like such unbelievable levity. And not only that, he was the only person, AEW Dynamite, I believe, ran one show with no wrestlers ringside, one or two anyway. There was no one. So what he did was he put the drawings on the chair, one of which was of Brandy Rhodes, and he got off with it. And it was just, absolutely magnificent stuff. And he's had fantastic matches with Darby Allin and Kenny Omega as well. So, yeah, Sammy Guevara is just unbelievably talented. I adore him.
Yeah, I think Sammy Guevara has to be in your top 5, not just because of just because of his in-ring ability. That Darby Allin match last week was really good. But yeah, just for, we talk about escapism and just distracting you from the awful stuff that's going on in the world right now. And he's someone who, the moment he appears on screen or steps into a ring or whatever, I really enjoy him, and his appearances on the Bubbly Bunch as well has been great. Handful got a great comment here from Jason McGuire. Thank you for your comment, Jason, who says, "Are we only counting superstars? Because surely a person thriving in the empty arenas is Byron Saxton. Definitely gave the Adams a run for their money for the best game show host ever." Yeah, we talked about him today. On the Wednesday Night War review when we were analysing the Newly Bros show, the Newly Bros game that they held with Matt Riddle and Timothy Thatcher. But yeah, he's been a sensation, Hamlet.
Yeah.
Hell yeah!
I couldn't get on board with not so much Sidgwick's impression of it, but that segment he described, because I think I was depressed. However, I was in a better mood watching NXT this morning. And the Newly Bros performance, of which obviously we haven't mentioned Matt Riddle yet, and I feel like I'll be able to make time for him in my list, if not this podcast. But that segment and Byron Saxton's work in it certainly shone a bit of a spotlight on how knowing yourself and knowing what you're capable of is like so powerful in setting, because if you can radiate such confidence in your ability to be the butt of the joke, in your ability to be very, very silly and not all that serious, which Byron Saxton can obviously be, I think that's of a huge advantage. There's nothing worse, and I mean this in the case of One Final Beat, literally nothing worse than trying to be earnestly tough in this ridiculous setting. And Byron Saxton was the polar opposite of that in his like role as the host of the Newly Bros. In terms of his commentary, I've got to say I just don't notice it because it's that Raw thing where you kind of find yourself blanking a lot of it out, not least because you don't want to listen to what Jerry Lawler might say next. But I don't hold that against him personally. When he's been given a spotlighted role, certainly he's delivered, even if I might not have particularly loved that first Austin one.
And from one hilarious performer to another who's also very, very, very good between the ropes, Michael Sidgwick, Brit Baker.
Oh my God, Brit Baker. What an unbelievable revelation she has proven to be. The thing that impressed me most about Brit Baker is that the vignette on this week's Dynamite, you can write that, okay? You can prepare that material, you can write it, you can redraft it. When you're actually filming it, you can come up with new tweaks, or you can use your environment to enhance the comedy value, like she was demanding, for example, that a makeup assistant get the chair out of her way because she wouldn't dare do it herself. She's a doctor and she's a role model. She shouldn't have to do such menial things. That maybe is the kind of thing that gets improvised. It's one thing to be really funny. It's one thing to craft something deliberately. It's quite another in the throes of a professional wrestling match when you're up a height with adrenaline, when you are pissing blood out of your face, to use it as ink or paint to create this mini masterpiece she had with Hikaru Shida. She reacted organically to a story beat that had been literally pummeled out of her to create a last 3 minutes of a pro wrestling match that was, I thought it was, it's going really good. This is probably Brit Baker's best performance so far. I was enjoying it. And then in the last 3 minutes, because of her work and how she adapted her injury into it in a maniacal look of how much she loved it, I was like up a height. I was punching the ceiling at how great the last 3 minutes of that match was. She even demanded the glove of the referee when she was about to apply her finish because she didn't dare get blood in someone else's mouth. She's just been amazing.
Right, before we run through the top 5 best wrestlers of the empty arena ranked from AEW and from WWE, Hamflet, just a few names to just throw at you because the comment section are talking about them. Drew McIntyre, first of all.
Yes, I think we can say that his post-WrestleMania run has been a modest success, which flies in the face of how some babyfaces are booked after that show. So tentatively, I would say things are going all right for Drew with the WWE title.
Christopher Gilmartin says, happy birthday, Hamflet. Any quick opinion on Aleister Black?
Fine, but no better or worse than he was with a crowd. Like, I'm not feeling anything about the empty arena that he's doing better. He still hits really hard, but he kind of did at the time. He's exactly where he is on the card. So it's a passing grade. It's a C+ at the moment in this era, I think.
And I couldn't go on without mentioning Balls, regular contributor, who's desperate to hear your thoughts on Apollo Crews. He's been heavily featured. Obviously, he's going to be missing out on Money in the Bank. But yeah, he's been, I mean, I can't imagine his combined on-screen wrestling time in the last few weeks compared to his last year. Must be night and day.
There's a fantastic statistic in that, actually. I'd like to see someone do the actual mathematics on that. It would be really fascinating. Apollo Crews has really impressed me because I'm not saying that he really generated much noise before, but again, it's half that thing that Hamlet was talking about where you block certain things out. With there being no fans there, you really get a sense of who's got like great physical timing, who can really make it look like they're chinning someone or like battering them, but they're not. They're just making it look so snug but safe at the same time. And I think Apollo Crews has really sort of opened people's eyes as to what a great fundamental professional wrestler he is.
What do you reckon to it, Hamlet, before we wrap up here?
It's a push, isn't it? It's weird in WWE because this is a push. There he is hobbling off Raw, crying after another like 2 matches on the show and a lot of in-ring time. So this is a push and he's not blowing it, and fair play to him because after 4 years, he could have easily just thrown in the towel on any of this. So the jury's out, but it's not been a failure.
Right, Dadley Boys, I'm going to give you a quick minute here to tot up your 5-1 best wrestlers of the Empty Arena era ranked on AEW and WWE. For those of you watching and listening at home, make sure you join us 4 p.m. live on YouTube tomorrow to preview SmackDown, to answer all your questions, and of course, to deal with any breaking news we've got going on. And if you're enjoying this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts. Today, we reviewed the Wednesday Night War. Tomorrow is, of course, Wrestle Culture. Compete with a bloody good quiz. Right. That's enough time for you two. Michael Sidgwick, number 5 in AEW Best Wrestlers of the Empty Arena era. Who gets it for you?
Coming in at number 5. Everybody dies, but everybody loves it. It's Lance Archer.
Good choice. I've so enjoyed him. Just like we talked about it on the podcast, but we so enjoyed his just murdering of jobbers, and the fact that he came out this week for his semi-final match, simultaneously killing someone before the match even started, and then just basically almost forced Cody to throw in the towel for his own brother. So excited for that final, which is presumably taking place at Double or Nothing. Who's number 5 in WWE for you, Michael Hamflet?
All her guys are complete losers, but she's at least winning at life. Zelina Vega, for the work rate alone, she's putting in shift after shift.
Yeah, shit, they always lose. They're sort of like the Job Squad 2.0. But yeah, I can't help but be mesmerized when she is talking and selling things. And yeah, I feel like I want to give a nod to Apollo Crews' slap this week. But yeah, I generally think most of the time it's Zelina Vega that keeps you entertained with that stable, which she's still managing to get over, like you say, despite their terrible record. Right, number 4 in AEW, Michael Sidgwick.
Much like a certain type of tooth, she's proving herself wise beyond her wrestling years. It's Brit Baker.
She's a dentist, but she doesn't like to talk about it. Number 4 in WWE, Michael Hamflet.
I like The Fiend again for 30 minutes. It's Bray Wyatt.
You reckon he wins the title and Money in the Bank?
Christ, I hope not. I don't want any of this feud. I'm almost regretting my decision as we have this conversation. WrestleMania was good. WrestleMania was great.
I think I have a feeling, we were talking about this on the news, myself and Andy this morning, that he is going to recapture that Universal Championship, and they're basically going to pretend everything that happened prior to, well, you know, Goldberg, WrestleMania, all that. None of that happened. Bray Wyatt, in about 6 months' time, will have just been champion for that entire stretch. Number 3 in AEW, Michael Sidgwick. Sammy G. For those of you listening on the podcast, he just held up a piece of paper that just says Sammy G. Well deserved. He's fast becoming my favorite wrestler, and I don't want to be accused of bias. I love WWE.
It's preference,
I love AEW.
man. It's preference. These idiots don't understand.
But what I was going to say, there's
the meanings of the word bias and preference.
But what I was going to say is the ranks of future world champions that AEW have got. You know, MJF. We haven't even mentioned MJF because he's been great, but he's mainly been cutting promos from at home and suffering from life-threatening illnesses. But MJF, Darby Allin, and of course Sammy Guevara, they are set in AEW. Number 3 in WWE, Michael Hamflet.
Third best pro wrestler on this list. Period. Seth Rollins.
Hey, what a recovery for him, though, because this time, not even this time last year, because this time last year he was going into a decent feud just subsequent to that.
He went into one decent match. The rest of his year was goose.
But yeah, I think this transition for him to a heel character, and then even though the fact he lost at WrestleMania has proved the making of him. And yes, fans may complain the lack of Kevin Owens, but you know, Kevin Owens isn't there. Seth Rollins is, and it's a match I'm at least far more excited for than when Jinder gets the shot at Drew after Money in the Bank. Anyway, right, who makes number 2 on your list, Michael Sidgwick?
Well, these are sad times we're in, but he's not breaking down the walls of Jericho. He's breaking down the walls of Heartache. Bang, bang. It's Le Champion, a warrior for these times.
How excited are you for him to step back between the ropes as part of Le Sex Gods next week?
That's literally the best tag team name of all time. Other than Miracle Violence Connection, it is the Holy Demon Army. It's in that sort of stratosphere, these awesomely badass 90s Puro names. Le Sex Gods. Fantastic.
The Sex Gods versus Kenny Omega and Matt Hardy's in-ring debut for AEW as well next week. So much looking forward to that. What a week we've got next week. 2 World Championship matches on NXT. The return of MJF and Jon Moxley. They're presumably going to set stuff up. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. Who just misses out on the top spot for you, Michael Hamflet?
it would be my wife's birthday if this man offered us both a threesome on a washer, Matt Riddle.
Dickhead. What a complete dick. Happy birthday.
Number one, the best wrestler of the empty arena era in AEW is Michael Sidgwick.
If you're feeling down, don't drink bleach. Just get a dose of the cleaner, Kenny Omega.
I'm going to be out of a job here. I normally read the stuff that these two write, and anyway. Right, let's wrap this thing up with you, Michael Hamlet. Who in WWE is the best wrestler of the empty arena era?
I don't believe any of Jerry Lawler's translations, but Asuka.
So, just to reiterate, let's run through 5-1 in AEW very quickly, Michael Sidgwick.
Lance Archer, Brit Baker, Sammy Guevara, Chris Jericho, Kenny Omega, descending order.
Yeah, very good stuff. And for you, Michael Hamlet in WWE?
Zelina Vega, Bray Wyatt, Seth Rollins, Matt Riddle, and Asuka.
I can't really argue with any of them, to be honest. Some really good stuff. No doubt people will disagree, but
sorry, Cody. I do love you still, but you're number 6 in my heart.
Sorry, not sorry, Dexter Loomis. I couldn't give a toss, mate.
No doubt the arguments this will continue. And I've really enjoyed this, though. We should do this again every week, I do believe.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, game for this. Let's see what fight it causes after the factor.
Exactly. As I said, though, if you enjoy this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe here on YouTube. Plus, you can let us know your thoughts on Twitter at What Culture WWE. Perhaps even suggest what we are going to do our rankings on next week. Plus, watch there. You can follow all three of us. You can follow birthday boy Michael Hamlet. Go and wish him a happy birthday at
Michael Hamlet.
You can follow Michael Sidgwick at
Sidgwick.
You can follow me at Adam Wilborn. Follow us all at What Culture W, as I said. Make sure you follow our lovely editor, Phil, at Phil My Chambers. But this has been Get the Table, ranking the best wrestlers of the empty arena era. Thank you so much for all your donations, for all your comments, for all your contributions today. My thanks as well to the Dadley Boys. Thanks for watching, and we will see you soon.